In the relentless busyness of modern life, we have lost the rhythm between work and rest. These are the opening words of a book called Sabbath by Wayne Muller, and they're words that I've come back to again and again over the years. In the relentless busyness of modern life, we have lost the rhythm between work and rest. Does this feel true to any of you? Yeah. I think for a lot of us, we're kind of soaked in this mainstream culture, at least in New England, that's informed by the Puritan work ethic, where action and accomplishments are better than rest, that doing something, pretty much anything, is better than doing nothing. So Reverend Muller, who's a Methodist minister and author and spiritual director, and a big fan of Sabbath, he says, he kind of describes this ethos this way. Because of our desire to succeed, to meet ever-growing expectations, we do not rest. Because we do not rest, we lose our way. We miss the compass points that would show us where to go. We bypass the nourishment that would give us succor. We miss the quiet that would give us wisdom. We miss the joy and love born of effortless delight. Poisoned by this hypnotic belief that good things come only through unceasing determination and tireless effort, we can never truly rest. And for want of rest, Reverend Muller concludes, our lives are in danger. I know I've been feeling this way for quite a while now, not really knowing what to do with my rest time in a way that actually nourishes me. I live with chronic illnesses, and so I do have to physically rest pretty regularly if I want to function, but putting my feet up and watching a show or taking a nap doesn't always translate to a kind of spiritual nourishment. My soul might not feel any more rested, and so often I feel this nagging unease that I could be responding to emails that continue to pile up. I could be productive about cleaning my apartment. I mean, I feel unease that I could be doing a better job of resting. It's like, does that resonate with any of you, right? Can't even rest right. So I invite us all to consider an intentional practice of rest, a practice of taking Sabbath, a time specifically set apart for rest, renewal, and delight. The concept of Sabbath is thousands of years old, and I know it best from a Jewish perspective with the Hebrew word Shabbat. This comes right out of Genesis chapter 2, when there's a story of God creating the universe in 6 days, and then the heavens and the earth and all they contain were completed. And on the seventh day, God finished doing the work of creation. And God blessed the seventh day and called it holy, because on it, God rested from all of the work of creation. God rested. The Hebrew uses the verb lashevet, which just means to sit down or to rest. God took a seat and created a day of rest. The anglicized word Sabbath means the same thing, and I'll use them kind of interchangeably throughout here. In Jewish practice, this has come to mean setting aside the time from right before sundown on Friday evening to about an hour after sunset on Saturday night, these 25 hours or so as a time to rest. And many early Christian traditions kept this idea but shifted their observance of the Sabbath to Sundays with a similar understanding of it as a day for spiritual rest and prayer. Growing up deeply rooted in Jewish culture, I've experienced a whole bunch of different ways of observing Shabbat at different times in my life. Coming up on this 4-year mark of the pandemic, I'm remembering that was a time, especially toward the beginning, that a deepening Sabbath practice was really like a godsend for the pun, I apologize. But right soon as lockdown hit, I made a commitment to attend my synagogue Zoom Shabbat services every Friday night, right from the start of lockdown. I was so hungry for community and for tradition and something other than this anxious doom scrolling through Facebook that that was all of the first 6 months for me, I think. But from the time that service started on Friday night, it felt like an entryway into a different kind of time. For about those 25 hours, I tried not to do any work for any of my jobs. I wouldn't check the news. That was hard. I would make a point of calling my friends, reading novels, and hanging out in a hammock on my balcony. I actually went and purchased a hammock for the express purpose of delighting in during lockdown, and that was a good purchase. Highly recommend. I learned from that. And after a few weeks, taking this Shabbat time was really an anchor for me. It gave me a sense of rhythm and something to look forward to, a way to not have my entire life be one continuous stream of either trying to keep productive during a global pandemic or just distracting myself from whatever I was really feeling. And it was a time to connect to the quiet that gives wisdom, to be restored for whatever might come in the following week. Over these past 4 years, this practice has been a part of my life more often than not, but certainly not successfully and every week and successful by whatever standards I set for myself. I will say that even just telling my congregants and coworkers that I try not to do work emails on Shabbat has given me at least some breathing room. I do check my emails then, but I try really hard not to. And it gives my week a bit of a rhythm other than unceasing availability. I remember at the ordination of Reverend Elizabeth Wynn, one of our Sanctuary Boston folks, she was charged to not be a quivering mass of availability. I want to practice that with my Sabbath, right? But as I prepared for this reflection, I realized that my Sabbath practice needs a tune-up right now. For me, right now, what I'm hungry for isn't just a break from work and productivity. It's something more like a deep nourishment and connection. I know that one-on-one time with friends does that for me, and so does adventuring to a museum or exploring some new town I haven't been to. But frankly, I get pretty lonely and out of whack when I haven't been to synagogue in a while. It's a tricky balance that I haven't been managing well recently. Friday afternoon comes around and I'm wiped. Maybe I've been working from home and I'm in my pajamas, or I'm just finishing up a whole bunch of emails and computer work for the congregation that I serve. The idea of getting dressed nicely and then piling me and Sully into the car and then driving to synagogue and looking for parking and being around a crowd of people, that just often makes me groan. And I've noticed that staying in feels easier, and I argue to myself that it's certainly restful to lay around at home. That's true. It is. So I haven't been going to Jewish community stuff all that often this winter, but Shabbat has started to feel kind of empty. Because while intentional solitude can be really restful for me, I do crave community and ritual and connection to tradition. So what do you crave? What rest do you want to invite into your life? What might a Sabbath practice look like for you? As I reflect on this, I invite us here into kind of a recipe for Sabbath. When I was in seminary, when I transferred to Andover Newton from Hebrew College, it blew my Jewish little mind when one of my Christian professors, Reverend Brita Gill Ostern, told me that you could have Sabbath time any day. It didn't need to be on those special holy days, as long as you intentionally carve out some time for it. And it's just, that still messes with my head, and I love it. It's a spiritual technology that any of us can use. Doesn't even need to be a full day, but it should be at least a few hours, enough that you might feel renewed, or maybe even enough to feel bored, and experience that for a bit. And then the next step is to figure out what will make that time feel special, might make it feel holy. So set yourself some parameters for this time, what you consciously will and won't do. Judaism has evolved a whole host of rules over the centuries about what's considered work. Not handling money, not conducting business, and in more observant communities, not using electricity or cooking or writing or using the phone or driving or a whole bunch more. But it's not just the things you don't do, it's also adding in important practices that are meant to increase joy. having festive meals with family and loved ones, singing, communal ritual and prayer, special time with a partner, time for reading and learning. And all of this is because we're choosing to use our time differently. And by setting clear boundaries around this time, we can create a container for delight. So what might ceasing from work and delighting in this time look like for you? What are the things that you would want to abstain from for whatever period of time that you set aside? Could it be checking work email, online shopping, not using specific apps on your phone that you might mindlessly turn to, or just not planning for the next thing? I'm going to invite us into a little bit of a time to actually brainstorm this for yourself. Underneath your chairs, for those here in person, there's some paper. There's also some pens up here if you don't already have one. I want to invite you to figure this out for yourself if you'd like. I'll invite you to get up and get pens if you want, but just let me give an invitation here. Sorry, I lost this here. So if you were to set aside some time for Sabbath, for a couple hours, for a day, whatever that is, what would you refrain from doing? What would you say no to? What kind of work would you not do? Okay. We're going to give us a few moments to just write. You won't be asked to read this to anybody. Those of you online, you're welcome to just write on a piece of paper. You're welcome to put it in the chat if you want. We won't read it aloud here. Take a few moments. What would you want to step away from for your Sabbath practice? Mark David, would you noodle for a few? Thank you. You're welcome to keep writing and thinking on this. But I want to also invite in those practices that bring us joy and delight. It's not just no's. So for you, this is for you. What would you consciously want to engage in? What do you want to seek out during this Sabbath time? What would bring you feelings of renewal or connection? Maybe a spiritual practice in the most traditional sense, like meditation or prayer. Maybe being out in nature, reading poetry or a novel, listening to a spiritual podcast, being with your family in a particular way, reaching out to loved ones. Go ahead and brainstorm. It might help if you think about this as like a little retreat that you set for yourself. We'll take a few more moments to write, and again, online, write in the chat or on your own. You can keep writing if you'd like. I just wonder for each of us if this, whatever this is for you, if that could be a fixture in your life, how would that be for you? I want to invite us to just allow ourselves to be curious about it and to be willing to see what possibilities emerge. So to recap, step 1, set aside a clear block of time for rest and renewal. Step 2, get clear on what you want to say no to, what you want to let go of, and what you want to say yes to, what you want to seek out. And then step 3 is to have some sort of ritual that starts and ends your Sabbath time. It could be lighting a candle, taking 3 intentional deep breaths, reading a poem, singing a song, really anything that marks a transition moment. And not only do you want to signal to your brain and to your heart, and maybe to the people around you, that this time has begun, this new kind of time, you want to make sure you signal its end too. This is one I'm not consistent at, and I think it makes a big difference. Whenever you're done, whether it's the actual end of the time you've set aside or you get called away, do your little closing ritual and take a moment to thank that time for what it had to offer you before you consciously re-engage in the rest of the world so it doesn't just kind of slide into the mundane. And step 4, this last one, is just to notice. Notice how it feels to practice Sabbath time, how it feels to be present to the moment and the people who are dearest to you. Notice what insights come to you when you slow down, when you set aside the need to be productive and focus on delight. And notice how it helps shape the way you live the other 6 days of the week. My friends, may you savor your time of rest and delight. May it renew you, reconnect you, and remind you of what is most important. Slow down. Life wants to meet you where you are, not where you think you should be. So may it be. Beloveds, the work might never be done, but it's okay to rest. What might be possible for you if you create a container for delight in your days? What might grow out of the quiet, of the connection, of the tradition and the rootedness that you so crave? And how might you want to share that with the world? If you're so moved to share that with a buddy here from Sanctuary and check in with each other, how's it going? How's your practice going? I encourage that. However you go tonight, go knowing that you are worthy of rest. You are worthy just by being you. Go and delight and be nourished.